clear that social distancing will not be enforced, that there are going to be larger bubbles. You won't have to keep within those bubbles a metre apart. Is that an enormous relief when it comes to getting the classrooms up and running again?
It is, yes. If that's the case and if that's safe, then absolutely it's a huge relief. We can go back to normal and we can put the classrooms back the way we were. We can take off all that tape that's on various things. We can put our sofas back and we can get back to doing what we love doing, which is teaching all of our children. I'm just a little old head teacher sitting in Worcestershire, though, and I really, really desperately want someone to come along and say, here's your guidance. Yes. This is what it's safe to do. Off you go, get on with it. And at the moment, no one's giving that to me. It
must be very frustrating for you, because we know that this is going to be, according to this report, it's going to be announced next week. But meanwhile, we have the Prime Minister saying, pubs are opening, restaurants are opening, we're opening up the, parts of the hospitality sector. You can go and get your hair cut. But there's children, I know that some schools have opened for some children, but there are hundreds of thousands of children who are not going to get a whiff of an education until September. Do you feel like the government has neglected school children?
Absolutely. I feel hugely frustrated, hugely angry on behalf of my pupils and my parents and my staff. I feel that the schools were closed very abruptly, so we had very little notice to prepare. We've had, throughout the course of this, very little direct information. And now we're being told, we'll scrap it all in September and you can get on with the business of going on. But it seems to be there's much greater guidance coming out for pubs. So I've had parents say to me, well, I can go get a drink in a pub, but my child can't come back to school. And I'm left at the face of it trying to explain to parents why that's the case. I'm not even sure I understand why that's the case.
Let's talk to Jeff Barton. Jeff, you're the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders. Undoubtedly very keen, and I'm sure many of your members are very keen to get pupils back into the classroom. We know that schools have been open. They've been looking after key workers' children and vulnerable children as well. They've not been closed. But the chance to have everybody back in the classroom, is that something you're welcoming, or is it something that has real concerns for you?
No, we would definitely welcome it. I mean, as Bryony says, of course, we're going to want that reassurance about public health. That's not just teachers and other staff who need that, that's parents as well. And I think at the heart of this, Ben, there's been a little bit of a misunderstanding in a sense that social distancing within a school has always meant something different from social distancing around the school. And that notion of whether it's 2 metres or 1 metres has never really been part of what's called the hierarchy of controls within a school. It's been about keeping students together. Now, I think a lot of my members, and I represent 20,000 head teachers and deputies, will be saying we can understand that. And in primary, generally speaking, children are taught in those bubbles, those classes. And if we're saying now that it's safe to have larger class sizes, we get that. Secondary is a slightly different issue. And if you're in a college, it's a different issue, because what we were told was it wasn't just about those young people in schools. It was about them travelling to schools, and we would just want the reassurance, and I think the community would want the reassurance, that children therefore travelling to school, whether it's on public transport, going to newsagents, supermarkets, all of that has been factored in as well, so that we can then start to get to some kind of business as usual.
Jeff, the problem with secondary schools, of course, as opposed to primary schools, is that children don't get taught in their classes. They don't stick with classes. They go and do other subjects, and they'll be in different groups and streams when it comes to other classes. So actually, how do you keep children in bubbles?
Well, that's the main question. And what we've been saying to the Department of Education, you have to look at secondary differently for the reasons you say, Susanna, that a child, even if they're going to maths like their friend is going to maths, maybe going to a different maths teacher because they're in a different set. Now, my reading of that story in the Telegraph today is what the Department for Education is saying is that what a bubble means in secondary is a year group. And suddenly, as someone who was a head teacher, I can see that keeping your year 7s, your year 8s, your year 9s separate in the way that they tend to be, and them going to their normal lessons, but thinking how do you keep them separate at break and lunchtime, I think that becomes more manageable. It's not straightforward, but it's more manageable than trying to have different teachers teaching different children who they don't know. And I think that has been the breakthrough moment in what we're expecting from this guidance.
Professor Mickey, parents will still be concerned, I'm sure, some of them, many of them, don't know how many of them, and teachers, about the infection risk. Is there any reassurance that you can give them?
I think the infection risk is still very high. And I think a couple of points I'd like to make. First of all, I think schools are an excellent situation where children can actually be educated about viral transmission and about all the protective measures that should be taken, including social distancing or physical distancing between people, because the more distancing, the less the risk of transmission. So it's a wasted opportunity not to be trying what we can do in schools. The second issue is what we need is a very clear overall strategy from the government. At the moment, we have lots of piecemeal measures or lifting of restrictions without the data to be able to understand what degree of risk does it incur by lifting different restrictions. So we can't evaluate which restrictions is better to lift and which
Does
are
it
not.
make sense to you that parents can go to the pub, have a few drinks, and perhaps, I don't know, be tempted to bend the rules on social distancing, but their children aren't back at school right now?
Yes, I think this is a question of priorities and values. And I think the society as a whole should be brought into that conversation. And there should be more of a consultative partnership approach about how we want to go forward. Because all of these lifting of restrictions is going to make greater risk, more disease, disability and death. And I think that everybody needs to own that strategy.
Well, which would you prioritise, pubs or schools?
Personally, I would put the education and the well-being of the next generation extremely high on the list, if not highest. And I think other things would come lower. But we do need this comprehensive overall strategy, not these piecemeal announcements.
Bryony, have you found that parents have been reticent to send their children back? Because I know that slowly more and more pupils are coming back to school. Have they been nervous about the infection rate? Have they been nervous about sending them back? Or have they been sort of just relieved that finally the kids can go and see their friends again and get back into that classroom environment?
I think it's a combination. I have had a lot of parents who are very anxious. We've tried to give out as much information as possible to let parents know what we're doing in school to reassure them. But I have had children who haven't come back in the designated year groups because parents are understandably anxious. I think I get that totally. I've got children myself. I think any parent would be nervous about it.
So what do you think they need to see, Bryony, in terms of making this work for your parents at your school come September? What do those parents need to see which would allow them to have the confidence to say, you know what, I'm totally comfortable with the kids going back to school?
To be honest, I don't know if we're ever going to reach that stage, or certainly not in September. I think what they need to see is that schools have a handle on what they're doing based on very clear guidance from the government. And I think they need to be reassured that their children, the most precious things in the world to them, are going to be safe back in school. I think we are noticing a lot of children whose mental health is struggling at the moment. So increasingly parents are saying, I want them to be back with their friends, particularly only children who don't have siblings or cousins. But they're saying, I need to be reassured that when they come back, they will be safe. And we need, as a school, I need to be able to reassure my staff and the parents that we have done everything possible according to the guidance to make sure it is a perfectly safe environment for the children.
Yeah.